oak, hickory, maple. There are so many different types of wood in the world, so which one is the best to use in your offset smoker? Well, today on Fatty's Feast, we are diving headfirst into that question. It's post oak. That's right, post oak is the best type of wood to use in your offset smoker. That's what Aaron Franklin uses, and he's the best. So, yeah, that's it. That was an easy video. Pretty quick. I still got like 10 minutes left. I could do some stand-up or something for my TikTok account. I'm just kidding. Let's not do that. The reason I said post oak is because if you've been smoking meats for any amount of time, or even if you're just first starting out, you've seen or heard about Aaron Franklin, who is the godfather of Central Texas barbecue. And in many cases, people call him the best pitmaster in the world. Aaron Franklin uses post oak wood. So many people, including me, when I first started out, thought, oh, well, post oak is the best kind of wood to use. There's no question. But in reality, the answer to the question, what is the best wood to use in your offset smoker, goes much deeper than looking at what the best pitmaster in the world uses. And before we go any further, I want to welcome you to Fatty's Feast. If it's your first time tuning in, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, I love you so much. My name is Josh. This channel is all about making the best food you'll ever eat without leaving your backyard. If you find value in today's video, I'd appreciate it so much if you just smash that like button, get my content out to more people. And if you leave a comment telling me what you thought, what woods you like to use in your smoker, I'd love to hear from you guys. So moving on, one of the things that makes barbecue so special are the different styles of barbecue throughout the United States. Like I said, you have Central Texas style barbecue, which is mostly beef brisket and sausages seasoned with salt and pepper and then served dry with no sauce. But that's not the only style. If you travel over to the Carolinas, you got whole hogs, you got tons of pork products. And Carolina style barbecue is heavy on the sauce. Then you have Kansas City style, which is, focusing on burnt ends. And then you got Memphis style barbecue, which is dry rubs and ribs. And as you look at these regions and each of their styles of cooking, you realize there's not one way of doing things. Everything's different and everyone's taste is different depending on where you're from. Now, even if I think about us here in Connecticut, we don't have a Connecticut style of barbecue or a New England style of barbecue. My personal preference is Central Texas style barbecue. That's what got me into this in the first place. But I also like using sauce. I like making my own sauce. I like experimenting, which is basically like a sin in Central Texas. So I'm sorry if I offend you. But even as I have friends over to try my barbecue, I found that the taste per person is completely different. Some people like that dry, salt, heavy pepper flavor. Some people like a little bit more smoke flavor. Some people don't like it at all. So when you first start out, you really got to experiment and see what you like the best. But the point of me going on that tangent was, depending on where you're from, depends on what kind of wood you're going to use for smoking or what kind of wood you can even get. Going back to post oak. We have post oak here in Connecticut, but it's not really readily available. I live in the northern half of the state, and post oak really is toward the southern end of the state. And even then, there's not that much. We have tons of red and white oak. That's all over the place. But post oak specifically is a little hard to come by. Think of somewhere like California. I mean, slim pickings out there for wood. You're not gonna get post oak wood out in California unless it's shipped into you, which would cost an assload. So you really have to take what you can find, but embrace the kind of wood that's local to your area and make that your style of cooking. That's what makes it so special. That's what I love about barbecue, is there's just not one way of doing things. Now, one thing that's even more important than what kind of wood is the best wood to use is the fact that you're burning a clean fire. I'm actually going to do a video on fire management because I've learned a lot about this over the last few years just practicing out here. And when I do that, I'll put a link here and I'll put a link in the description and in the comments and the end of the video, whatever. So be sure to check that out when I make it. But really, you could have the best wood in the entire world, but if you can't burn a clean fire, your barbecue is going to taste like shit. So before you freak out about what kind of wood will make the best food, in order to make the best food, you have to burn a clean fire. You have to practice that and you have to get good at it. If you can't get good at burning a clean fire, you're never going to make good barbecue. So focus on that a lot before you do anything else. So first, let's talk about the woods you should never use ever in an offset smoker. Basically, the best example of this would be something like pine. Any kind of softwood, anything that has sap and is just disgusting when you pick it up. And the reason for this is, when you pick up a piece of pine and your hands get covered in sap, well, think about it. When that burns, that's gonna go onto your food. I don't know about you, but I really don't want a brisket that tastes like a Christmas tree. If you're into that, well then, sure, use pine. I'm not gonna. Pine is great for construction and, burning it in a fire pit while you're having some beers with the boys, but just keep it out of cooking. That's the best bet. So general rule of thumb, if you're wondering if you should use a specific wood and you don't know what kind it is, basically if you pick it up and it feels like shit and it's disgusting and sappy and sticky, you don't want to use it. So what kind of wood should you use? Well, you want to stick to hardwoods. Now, I remember when I first started smoking, a lot of people were like, oh, you got to get your cherry, you got to get your apple, your peach, whatever. And fruit woods are an absolute great option for smoking. Now, the one good thing about fruit woods is they deliver a really deep color. If you use them on something like pork butt or ribs, you're gonna get like a dark red mahogany color and it's just amazing looking. However, fruit woods are not good at delivering a good smoke flavor. Now, for some people, that's fine. Some people don't want that smoke flavor like we were talking about earlier. But me personally, I want a good, clean smoke flavor. So I don't typically use fruit woods. Not only that, but they are a little bit harder to come by around here than something like an oak or a hickory. I also wouldn't use fruit woods for something like a brisket. You know, I don't need that deep color. I can get that just from smoking normally with my oak or something like that. So if you're looking for a good smoke flavor, I definitely recommend using something like an oak or a hickory or even a maple. That's typically what I use. Those are my 3 woods of choice. Now, you'll also hear a lot of people say, oh, you should use mesquite wood. Now, mesquite is a hardwood. It is an option for smoking. And you see it everywhere, you know, mesquite flavored barbecue sauces and mesquite flavored whatever. However, the problem with mesquite is it delivers a really pungent smoke flavor. And you might be thinking, well, isn't that good? Isn't more smoke flavor the goal? Not really. Mesquite is a great option for cooking something fast. Like if you're gonna do ribeyes over an open fire, like awesome. Those are gonna taste amazing. But putting a brisket on a smoker and using mesquite wood the whole time just ain't gonna work. In addition to having a harsh smoke flavor, it also burns a bit hotter than any other wood. So controlling temps can also be a nightmare. Now, when I say a strong smoke flavor, I don't necessarily mean it's gonna punch you right in the face and you're like, oh my God, I feel like my mouth is full of smoke. Let me put it into a different context. Let's say you take a bite of a really sweet cake. This is a bad example for me because I'm diabetic and would die, but just hear me out. So you take a bite of a really sweet cake and you're like, oh, that's really good. It's really rich, it's really sweet, I like this. But then you take another bite and you start to go, oh, you know what? This is a little too rich for me. And by your 5th bite in, you're like, yeah, I'm sort of sick of this. The same thing would go with that kind of smoke profile cooking with mesquite wood. You like it at first, you're like, oh, this isn't bad. I can eat this. But then the farther you get into it, you're like, oh, I'm not as committed as I was at the beginning. So really the farthest on the smoke spectrum I would go for me personally is hickory. Now, the other cool thing you can do, and this is something I do all the time, is mix woods. So if you're cooking ribs and you want that dark mahogany color, but you also want that smoke flavor, you can mix your oak and your cherry woods. Or even going back to mesquite, if you want a higher smoke profile, you can mix an oak and then throw a piece of mesquite on there every once in a while. That's not gonna kill you. So don't think you just have to stick to one type of wood. You can do whatever you want, really. Now, me personally, down here, I have my oak in front, and then I have maple in the back. So I'll use my oak chunks when I'm smoking something that's open, like a brisket for the first, 8 hours or so. And then when I wrap it and it doesn't get any more smoke flavor, I use my maple. There's a spider, jeez. Now, if you look up online what kind of wood to use, there's all these different charts of like, you need to use this for beef, but don't use this for pork, but don't use this for chicken, but you can use that for fish. Going back to, I think the most important thing is burning a clean fire, because no matter what wood you use, if you can't burn a clean fire, it's gonna taste like shit. And I haven't found that there's one wood that doesn't work for everything. I've used oak and hickory to smoke fish before, it's come out fine. I've used maple on red meat, I've used hickory on white meat. It really doesn't matter to me, in my opinion. But if you're concerned about that type of stuff, I don't think you can go wrong with using maple, oak, or hickory, especially if you're from the Northeast. Those are 3 widely available woods that you can get pretty much anywhere in this area. But let's talk about these a little bit more in depth. So your maple. This is going to deliver the least amount of smoke flavor. Maple is one of those woods I'm going to use if I don't want an extreme amount of smoke flavor. I've also found that maple tends to burn a bit cleaner than any of the other woods I use. I usually have no problem throwing a piece of maple on it, lights right up. Whereas the oak or the hickory, sometimes they take a little bit and you gotta warm them up. So like I said, I'll typically use this after something is wrapped, or if it's a few hours into cooking and I need to build that fire back up. I also use it to start my fires, and I use it if I need just a little bit more of a clean burning fire for a time period. Next we have our oak wood. Now oak wood is the wood I use the most. I'm joking around, I know I was making fun of post oak earlier, but I think specifically the oak I have delivers an all-around good smoke flavor, and I can use it for literally anything. I think oak is pretty easy to manage fire-wise for the most part, and I think it's a little difficult to over smoke something using oak. I think it has the perfect amount of flavor. Plus, like I said before, oak is widely available around me, so I can get an unlimited amount of this stuff. And lastly, my third option is hickory. Now hickory, I tend to mix with the oak because it does have a stronger smoke flavor. Hickory is also harder than oak, and I have a little bit of a harder time finding hickory. I do have like a quart of it here in my garage, but. So this will be my higher smoke flavor option because I don't want to over smoke with this stuff. You can do it, it's difficult, but it can happen. Now you might be wondering where I got these beautiful pieces of wood. First of all, I don't go to a Tractor Supply and buy little bundles of wood. I think that's a waste of money. They're like $5 for a bundle, and it's just, you have better options. Now the first thing is you can cut down a tree yourself if you want to do that, but I wouldn't cut down a tree just for the purpose of I need wood to smoke meats with. Most of the time you can go to a local tree service and they will be able to tell you what kind of woods they can get you. For example, my first load of wood, I called a tree service and they said they have a mix of maple, oak, and hickory. Now it wasn't separated out, so I had to do that myself, but that whole quart of wood they gave me cost like 180 bucks, which in my area is actually fairly cheap. Most of the time a quart of wood's like $2.50, but it's still cheaper than buying it from Tractor Supply in little bundles. Your other option is you can ask around. There's people on Facebook and town forums that have wood just sitting by the roadway because they cut a tree down. But like I said, use wood from trees that have been taken down for a good reason. You know, either they're sick or they're diseased or insects got to them. Make sure it's good wood, not something that's like rotting. And also make sure it's not waterlogged and make sure it's not moldy. But for the most part, you can find wood anywhere. You just gotta ask around. Now I did mention I had to separate my wood when I first got it. I'm no expert on species of trees and whatnot, but if you get a situation where you have to get a mix like I did, it's a very easy process to separate them. So the first thing I did is I separated my oak, which was probably about half the load. Now the easiest way to identify oak wood is by looking for these lines. I don't know if you can see them on camera, but they run perpendicular to the rings of the tree. Don't pay attention to these lines going this way, that's from the saw. You're looking for these little white lines. And if you see this, this is 100% guarantee that this is oak wood. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell, but for the most part, you can see them pretty fine. Here's an even better indication on this side. As you can see, a little bit difficult to see them, but they're there. Next, we have our hickory. Now hickory, first of all, is an extremely hard wood and it likes to splinter like this. So it's a pain in the ass to split most of the time, especially if you're doing it by hand. But the one thing with hickory, you can see that there's a dark inner color here, a dark red color, and then a whiter color on the outside. So if you see this, it could be oak, but most likely it's hickory. It's a very defined, like 2 to 3 inches, I don't know how many inches that is, but whatever. 2 to 3 inches of white space and then dark red. You can't tell that by looking on the outside, but you can see that there's no, you have the little cracks, but there's no lines going up like we had on the oak wood. And the smell of hickory, you know what, it smells like, this is a weird comparison, but it smells like, we used to have Thomas the Tank Engine sets, and like when you first opened those sets of wooden railroad things, like it smelled very good. Like it was like a fresh wood smell. I know that's weird, but that's what this brings me back to. I love sniffing wood. Don't judge me. And last but not least, your maple. Maple all throughout is one color. It's a very yellow, I say yellow, I don't know if that's the correct term, but it's a yellowish color, and it doesn't have really any defining characteristics. It's solid color, it's easy to split, it's usually not splintered like the hickory was, and it's also lighter. I feel like if you pick up a piece of maple versus like a piece of hickory, this is much denser, like much denser than this maple wood. Like this thing is thick, it's heavy. So at the end of the day, I think the best wood to use is dependent on where you're from, what you can get. I personally love using oak and maple and hickory. I think they're great options. If I get fruit wood, I like to use that. Like I said, I don't use it on stuff like brisket, but something on like a pork butt, amazing results. But more importantly, guys, make sure you're burning a clean fire. Understand how to burn a clean fire, practice burning a clean fire, do your test burns, do your biscuit temperature tests like I have done in previous videos. I'll put a link here. And if you're bored one day and have nothing to do and it's beautiful outside, and even if you have nothing to cook, come outside and start a fire in your pit and see what happens. See what happens when you put a split on. See what happens when you close the stack. See what happens when you open the firebox door all the way. All these things will make you become a better pitmaster and understand your smoker better. So at the end of the day, I hope you found value in today's video. Don't get too obsessed with, I need to burn this kind of wood for this type of meat and this type for this whatever. It's not a big deal. Like I said, I use oak for mostly everything and I've never had an issue. If you have any questions about anything we talked about today, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you guys. And like I said before, smash that like button if you found value. I really appreciate you guys and I really appreciate you watching. I'm going to put a link here for the fire management video. Until that time, there's going to be a different video there. Just whatever, watch it. And then over here, we have our smoker how-to playlist. Check those out if you want to learn more about the smoking meat process. And right here in the middle, of course, as always, if you love meat, press this and subscribe to Fatty's Feasts. Until next time, everyone, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay tuggy.